I'm joined now by Karl Deeter and Ian Kehoe to look at the papers in a bit more detail. Do you reckon she's the one, Karl?
I don't know. I'd be happy if he found anyone, you know, it's just good for him.
And a nice skiing holiday too. But listen to me, credit unions, that's the first story I think you were looking at. They're being told don't lend to struggling homeowners.
Yeah, it's a story that is broken on the front page of the Indo by Charlie Weston, and I think it makes sense. You shouldn't be giving more debt to people who can't pay their debts, and what is happening here is that the central bank is going to write to them, say you shouldn't be doing this. It's the wrong way of dealing with your customers, and I think it's bad for credit unions. It's also bad for people who are members of credit unions, because it then could potentially result in losses being inflicted on the credit union when new insolvency legislation comes in, where people will more than likely be hitting their short-term creditors like credit unions, car loans, credit cards, before they go after the mortgage.
Yeah.
And that's the crux of it, really.
I mean, Ian, it seems extraordinary that they need to be told. It seems extraordinary that they need to be told this.
Well, absolutely. In a sense, Keelin, credit unions have been sort of the untold story of the financial crisis. We know all about the banks, the problems within all of those. But there's been very little, really, people digging deep into what's going on at the credit unions. Over the next year or two, we're going to have a fundamental restructuring of the sector. The government's established a restructuring board. It's going to decide which credit unions are merged, which are shut, which are wrapped into others. They've put aside a €250 million pot of money to help recapitalise any credit unions that are in difficulty. We've seen with Newbridge, where a special administrator had to be appointed. There are talks of other credit unions in difficulty. And it would seem, not before time, but it would seem to make perfect sense not to give money to people who are already in significant difficulties. But I think that highlights the problems within credit unions, is that there isn't the records to cross-reference
with the banks,
with the banks, or even with a number of their own credit unions. There are cases, and you hear them all the time, people contacting that you might be able to get a small loan out of a credit union in one part of your own county, go down the road and get another, and that there's simply a lack of cross-checks and balances within the movement.
Gosh, that'll be very interesting to watch that. Yeah. Karl, I go to you on that one. The child benefit cuts are shelved, according to some of the papers today. I mean, we were only talking about them yesterday.
Yeah, it would seem that, as they said, there's no appetite to cut child benefit further. It's a hugely contentious issue, and the expert group that reported on it suggested that we have this two-tier system. Personally, I think that we should maybe do like what the French have done and just give people a tax credit, because at the moment, you tax somebody, you put that money onto a carousel that goes through the bureaucracy, the welfare system, and eventually it comes right back to them. It would be far easier to just say, here's a tax credit, the same as a PAYE credit, and we don't need 500 people to administer it.
With the minister in yesterday, he was saying the problem with that is who owns the child benefit? Like, who gets the tax credit? Does it belong to the child or the parents?
Well, at the moment, the child benefit goes to the parent anyway, and certainly you would have situations where you'd work it the same as anything else. If a lady was living in the family home as a homemaker, her husband would probably get it if he was the earner, or she would get it if it's
so
on her
just make a
taxes.
decision as to who owns it and who gets the credits.
In fact, kids, when they reach 16, if they stay in school, should probably be given the child benefit themselves as an incentive to keep them in there. Like, there's lots of different ways to work this.
I'd say there are parents all over the country going, what are you on about? Ian, the Croke Park talks, targeting staff on over 60,000.
Yeah, on and on it moves. And again, in the same way as child benefit, one of the reports was to put a kind of a line in the ground and say, if you earn more than 25,000, well, then your child benefit will be cut incrementally. They've done the same thing. This is the latest proposals on Croke Park. €60,000 was the magic number. If you earn more than 60,000, you're perceived to be one of the higher paid civil servants, public servants.
Are there many of them, do you know, Ian?
It's always very difficult to try and get the exact numbers, but one would imagine in this instance there's a large swathe of people. Basically, if you started off even relatively junior, the amount of increments over a long period of time would drag you up towards that number closer to retirement age.
Yeah, because it's not a monumental amount of money. I mean, it's enough.
It's a fine salary, but you're not rich.
Yeah.
In that sense. And interestingly, they say if they do that, I mean, they're looking in these Croke Park negotiations, or as they are now, the Lansdowne negotiations, going on in Lansdowne House, a penchant for stadiums, I think. But what they're looking at in this situation of trying to save €1 billion overall, and if they can, even this little bit, they're talking about maybe it might get them €250 to €300 million if they can tackle over that. But I also think there's an element of politics at play in all of this. I mean, you saw it on the news just there, all of the protests of frontline workers, a large number of whom aren't earning €60,000, and that if they're to be attacked on their premium pay and that to be tapped into, that there has to be the quid pro quo, and that's, in this instance, over 60,000.
Yeah, well, Russia's richest woman is coming over to Ireland, Karl.
That's right.
Elena, what's her name? Baturina.
Yeah, she's worth 2.2 billion, and she's come over.
2.2 billion. She could just sort it for us immediately.
Yeah, and she's a rags to riches story.
Yeah?
She started off working in a factory, married a powerful politician, zoomed straight to the top of a property industry over there. And it's another example of people coming into Ireland to buy up property here. They feel that there's value, and the former Morrison Hotel is now going to become branded as a Hilton Doubletree Hotel under her stewardship. And I think it's interesting, certainly on the broker side of our company, we've seen that new mortgage applications, about 12% of them come from overseas. And in fact, any loans that we've done that are greater than €1 million are all going to people who live abroad. So there is certainly a very different way of looking at the market in Ireland from people outside of Ireland than the way that we look at ourselves. And I think it's a good example of something that everybody faces when you look in the mirror. You know, you might not be as handsome or beautiful as someone else might see you, and it happens also in the property market.
That's fascinating.
This is a real microcosm story, Keelan. I mean, this was built by Hugh O'Regan, the hotel, the swashbuckling developer. He sadly passed away a number of months ago, designed by Jean Roche. If ever there was a hotel that seemed to, you know, solidify what Ireland was all about during the boom, this was it. It was taken over by the banks. She's bought it for €7 million. It seems to be quite a good deal. But wherever you go now, they always say money arrives when there's things for sale. Ireland is effectively for sale. The whole loan books of IBRC, the former Anglo, are being for sale. NAMA has all of the properties, and the vast amount of it from Park na Silla Hotel down in Kerry, all being bought by foreign money.
So they're all coming in. Listen, thank you both very much indeed for coming in this morning. That was really interesting about the property. Now it's time for sports news. Dave is here, and Dave, Barcelona got a bit of a shock last night.
Yeah, it's